The thunder crashed overhead as Rebecca Owens clutched her tear-stained letter, the words blurring before her eyes. Montana Territory, 1876, a place and time where a woman's future wasn't her own to decide, especially not a 20-year-old schoolteacher whose father had just arranged her marriage to a man 3 times her age. You can't hide in that schoolhouse forever, her mother had warned that morning. Judge Hollister is a respectable man. Your father has already accepted his offer. Rebecca wiped her eyes with her handkerchief as she looked around the one-room schoolhouse that had been her sanctuary for the past year. The wooden desks were neatly arranged, waiting for students who wouldn't return until Monday. Outside, the storm gathered strength, matching her turbulent emotions. The schoolhouse door suddenly burst open, bringing with it a gust of wind and rain and a tall, soaking wet stranger. "Pardon the intrusion, madam," he said, removing his dripping hat. Water cascaded from his dark coat onto the wooden floor. "Didn't mean to disturb you, but this storm came out of nowhere." Rebecca quickly tucked the letter into her pocket and wiped away her tears, embarrassed to be caught in such a state. "It's quite all right," she said, composing herself. "The schoolhouse is open to anyone seeking shelter." The stranger stepped fully into the light, and Rebecca felt her breath catch. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps mid-20s, with intense eyes that seemed to shift between blue and gray like the storm clouds outside. His face was tanned from the sun, with a strong jaw partially covered by stubble that suggested several days of travel. "Victor Wallace," he said with a slight bow. "Grateful for the roof." "Rebecca Owens," she replied, noticing how he kept a respectful distance. "I'm the teacher here." Victor nodded, removing his coat and hanging it by the door. Beneath it, he wore a simple shirt and vest with a holstered revolver at his hip, standard for any man traveling the frontier, though he didn't have the hardened look of a gunslinger. "You're new to Pinecrest," Rebecca observed, trying to distract herself from her troubles. "Just passing through," Victor replied, "or I was until this weather decided otherwise." He glanced at her face, noticing her reddened eyes but politely avoiding mention of them. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Rebecca shook her head, "just contemplating an unwelcome future." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Victor raised an eyebrow but didn't pry. Instead, he moved to the window, watching the rain pound against the glass. "Sometimes the storm has to get worse before it clears," he said quietly. "This particular storm shows no signs of clearing," Rebecca replied bitterly. Victor turned from the window, studying her with those changeable eyes. "In my experience, Miss Owens, there's always a choice, even when others say there isn't." Something in his words made Rebecca's heart beat faster. For the first time since receiving her father's pronouncement, she felt a flicker of hope. Little did she know that this chance encounter during a thunderstorm would alter the course of both their lives. The rain continued well into the evening. Rebecca lit the oil lamps as darkness fell, casting the schoolhouse in a warm glow. Victor proved to be a polite companion, helping her stack firewood near the small stove and respecting her space. "You're handy with that," Rebecca noted as he skillfully built a fire to ward off the growing chill. "Spent most of my life outdoors," he replied with a modest shrug. "Fire building becomes second nature." "Are you a rancher?" she asked, curious about this quiet stranger who seemed to possess a gentle strength. Victor paused, considering his answer. "I've worked cattle, but no, not exactly a rancher. I train horses mostly. Started with my father's farm in Colorado, then found I had a knack for working with the difficult ones others couldn't handle." "A horse whisperer," Rebecca said with a small smile, the first that had crossed her face all day. "Some call it that," he acknowledged with a hint of embarrassment. "I just listen to them better than most, I suppose." They fell into comfortable conversation as the evening progressed, sharing the simple meal Rebecca had packed for her day: bread, cheese, and apples supplemented by beef jerky from Victor's saddlebag. "So what brings you to Pinecrest?" Rebecca finally asked. Victor leaned back in his chair. "Ranch outside of town needs help with some wild Mustangs they've captured. The Harrington spread." "Harrington Ranch," Rebecca nodded. "One of the largest in the territory. Mr. Harrington's children attend my school." "And you," Victor asked, "have you always been in Pinecrest?" Rebecca's expression clouded. No, I came here a year ago after finishing at the teacher's college in Denver, my family. She hesitated. They have certain expectations of me that don't align with my own desires. Victor waited, not pushing for more. Rebecca found herself continuing. My father believes a woman's purpose is to marry well and raise a family. Education is merely a temporary indulgence until suitable arrangements can be made. And these arrangements have been made, Victor asked quietly, his perception surprising her. Rebecca withdrew the crumpled letter from her pocket. Judge Augustus Hollister has made an offer for my hand. My father has accepted. The wedding is to take place in 2 weeks' time. Her voice trembled. I've met the judge once at a town social. He's 58 years old and has buried 2 wives already. Victor's expression darkened. And your thoughts on this match, my thoughts? Rebecca gave a bitter laugh. I'm told my thoughts don't matter. Judge Hollister is wealthy and influential. The match is advantageous for my family. My mother says I should be grateful, but you're not. How could I be? I've spent my whole life preparing to be a teacher. I love my students, this schoolhouse. I've only just begun. Her voice broke. And now I'm to be the wife of a man who sees me as nothing more than a possession, a pretty ornament to grace his home and bear his children. Victor stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back to her as he stared into the darkness. When he turned, his expression was carefully controlled. What would you choose if the choice were truly yours? He asked. The question stunned Rebecca. No one had ever asked her that before. I would. She began, then paused, the possibility overwhelming her. I would continue teaching. I would marry someday, perhaps, but for love, not advantage. I would marry a man who saw me as an equal, who valued my mind as well as. She blushed. Other attributes. Victor nodded slowly. Then perhaps that's what you should do. You make it sound so simple, Rebecca said, shaking her head. My father has given his word. In his eyes and in the eyes of the law, I am his to give away until I marry. Then I become my husband's responsibility. The law is one thing, Victor said quietly, but there are higher principles. No person should own another's future. Rebecca studied him, wondering at the conviction in his voice. You speak as though you understand such constraints. A shadow crossed Victor's face. Let's just say I've seen what happens when people are denied their rightful choices. The storm began to abate, the thunder now distant rumbles. Victor moved to check his coat, which was nearly dry. The rain's letting up, he observed. I should be on my way before it gets too late. Where will you stay? Rebecca asked, suddenly reluctant to see him leave. I was headed to the Harrington Ranch, but given the hour, I'll likely take a room at the boarding house in town. Rebecca nodded, gathering her things. I should return home as well, though I confess I'm in no hurry to face my parents after today's disagreement. Victor donned his coat and hat, then surprised her by offering his arm. Allow me to escort you, Miss Owens. These roads will be muddy, and it's grown dark. Rebecca hesitated only briefly before accepting his arm. Something about Victor Wallace made her feel safer than she'd felt in a long time. As they stepped outside, the rain had indeed stopped, though the occasional lightning flash illuminated the distant mountains. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. My family's house is on the north edge of town, Rebecca directed as they began walking. They moved in companionable silence for a while, the mud sucking at their boots. When they reached the edge of town, the lights from windows guiding their way, Victor finally spoke again. Miss Owens, I don't mean to overstep, but may I offer a thought? Please do, she replied, curious. The world is changing. Even here in the territories, women are beginning to claim their independence. There are places where a talented teacher would be welcomed without question about her marital status. Rebecca glanced at him, surprised by his progressive thinking. Are you suggesting I simply leave? I'm suggesting you consider all your options before surrendering to a future you dread, Victor replied carefully. 2 weeks is time enough to make plans if necessary. They reached the white picket fence surrounding a modest 2-story house. Light glowed from the downstairs windows. This is my parents' home, Rebecca said, stopping at the gate. She reluctantly released his arm. Thank you for your escort, Mr. Wallace. Victor tipped his hat. The pleasure was mine, Miss Owens. He hesitated, then added, "I'll be at the Harrington Ranch for at least a month breaking those Mustangs, should you need a friendly ear. You can send word there." Rebecca felt a warmth spread through her chest at his offer. "That's very kind." "Not kindness," Victor replied with surprising intensity, "just recognition of your right to determine your own path." With that, he bowed slightly and turned to leave. Rebecca watched his tall figure disappear into the night before pushing open the gate and facing the reckoning that awaited her inside. The next morning dawned clear and bright, as though the previous day's storm had never happened. Rebecca sat stiffly at the breakfast table, avoiding her father's stern gaze and her mother's worried glances. "I've invited Judge Hollister to Sunday dinner tomorrow," Harold Owens announced, setting down his coffee cup with finality. "You will be present, Rebecca, and you will be cordial." "Yes, father," Rebecca replied mechanically, though inside she was screaming. "This is a fortunate match," her mother, Alina, added gently. "The judge's home is the finest in Pinecrest. You'll want for nothing." "Except freedom," Rebecca thought bitterly. "Except love, may I be excused?" She asked, "I need to prepare lesson plans for next week." Her father waved his hand dismissively. "Yes, yes, though I don't know why you bother. You'll be giving up that position soon enough." Rebecca bit her tongue and left the table, retreating to her small bedroom upstairs. She pulled out her journal and began to write, pouring her frustrations onto the page. Victor Wallace's words from the previous night echoed in her mind. There's always a choice, even when others say there isn't. Was there truly a choice for her? The thought of defying her father, of bringing shame to her family, seemed impossible. Yet the alternative life as Judge Hollister's wife felt like a slow death. Rebecca spent the morning in her room, ostensibly working on lessons but actually considering her options. By midday, she had made a decision. She needed more information and perhaps a bit of courage. "I'm going to visit Clara," she announced to her mother. Clara Bennett was her closest friend, married to the town's young doctor. "Be back before dark," her mother replied. "And Rebecca, please try to accept this situation with grace. Your father only wants what's best for you." Rebecca nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The walk to Clara's house took her past the town's main street. As she passed the general store, a familiar figure emerged and her heart skipped unexpectedly. Victor Wallace stood speaking with the shopkeeper, a list in his hand. He looked different in the daylight, more substantial somehow, his features sharper. He wore a clean shirt and vest, his gun belt conspicuously absent in town. He spotted her almost immediately, his serious expression warming into a smile that transformed his face. "Miss Owens," he greeted, crossing the street to her. "Good to see you recovered from yesterday's adventure." "Mr. Wallace," she replied, aware of curious glances from passers-by. Single young women didn't often converse with unknown men on the street. "I trust you found accommodations for the night." "I did, thank you, just collecting supplies before heading out to the Harrington place." He studied her face. "Are you well today?" The genuine concern in his voice nearly undid her. "As well as can be expected," she managed. Victor glanced around, noting the attention they were drawing. "I won't keep you, but my offer stands should you need a friend." "Thank you," Rebecca said quietly. "I may take you up on that sooner than you think." A flash of something surprise. Hope crossed his face, but he merely nodded and tipped his hat before continuing on his way. Rebecca watched him go, a plan forming in her mind. Clara's reaction to Rebecca's predicament was everything she could have hoped for. "That's outrageous," her friend exclaimed, pacing the parlor of her comfortable home. "Judge Hollister, the man is ancient, and those rumors about how his second wife died." "What rumors?" Rebecca asked, alarmed. Clara waved her hand. "Nothing proven, of course, but Eliza was young and healthy one day, then mysteriously ill the next. The judge had her buried with unusual haste." Rebecca felt sick. "My father won't listen to such rumors." "Of course not," Clara said bitterly. "Men like your father and the judge protect each other." She sat beside Rebecca, taking her hands. "You can't go through with this, we'll find a way out." "How?" Rebecca asked. "Where would I go? What would I do?" Clara thought for a moment. "My cousin in San Francisco runs a ladies' boarding house. She could take you in until you find a teaching position." "San Francisco?" Rebecca's eyes widened. "That's so far." Exactly, Clara said firmly. Far enough that your father and the judge couldn't easily drag you back. She squeezed Rebecca's hands. Think about it, I can arrange passage on the stagecoach. William and I would help with the cost. Rebecca felt tears welling up. You would do that for me, of course, you goose. What are friends for? Clara hugged her tightly. Just say the word. Rebecca wiped her eyes, hope rising within her. I need to think, and there's someone else I want to consult. Clara raised an eyebrow. Oh, and who might that be? Rebecca blushed despite herself. Just someone who offered a different perspective. Rebecca Owens, do you have a secret? Clara teased. Is there a man involved in this drama I don't know about? No, well, not like that, Rebecca protested. He said some things that made me think. Clara's expression turned serious. Be careful, Becca, men often have their own motives. I know, Rebecca nodded. But I think he genuinely wants to help. As she left Clara's house, Rebecca's mind was made up. Tomorrow, after the dreaded dinner with Judge Hollister, she would ride out to the Harrington Ranch and speak with Victor Wallace one more time. Then she would decide her future. Sunday dinner with Judge Augustus Hollister was every bit as dreadful as Rebecca had anticipated. The judge arrived precisely at noon, bearing a small box containing a gaudy ruby brooch that he insisted on pinning to Rebecca's dress himself, his fingers lingering uncomfortably on her collar. A small token of my affection, he declared, his breath smelling of tobacco and brandy despite the early hour, though no jewel could match the beauty of my future bride. Rebecca forced a smile, feeling the weight of the brooch like a brand on her chest. You're too kind, Judge Hollister. Augustus, please, he corrected, his watery eyes roving over her figure. We must dispense with formalities, my dear. Throughout the meal, the judge dominated the conversation, expounding on his cases, his property holdings, and the improvements he planned for his home once Mrs. Hollister takes residence. Rebecca's father nodded approvingly at everything, while her mother maintained a fixed smile that didn't reach her eyes. I understand you've been teaching at the schoolhouse, the judge said finally, addressing Rebecca directly, a noble temporary occupation for a young lady of quality. I find it more than temporary, Rebecca replied, unable to help herself. I've trained extensively for my position, the judge chuckled indulgently. Commendable, my dear, but unnecessary once we're wed. My household staff is more than adequate, and your time will be better spent as mistress of the house and, God willing, mother to my heirs. Rebecca felt bile rise in her throat. The thought of sharing this man's bed, bearing his children, made her physically ill. Rebecca has always been bookish, her father interjected with a forced laugh, but she'll adapt to married life quickly enough. Indeed, the judge agreed, his gaze lingering on Rebecca's figure again, youth is wonderfully adaptable. After what seemed an eternity, the judge finally took his leave, but not before extracting a promise from Rebecca's father that she would join him for a carriage ride the following Saturday to better acquaint ourselves. The moment the door closed behind him, Rebecca turned to her parents. I cannot marry him, she declared. I won't. Her father's face turned thunderous. You most certainly will. The arrangements are made. The judge is the most eligible match you could hope for. He's 3 times my age, and the way he looks at me like I'm a piece of meat at the butcher's counter. Rebecca, her mother gasped. Such language, it's true, Rebecca insisted, and there are rumors about his second wife's death. Enough. Her father roared, slamming his hand on the table. I will not listen to malicious gossip. Judge Hollister is a respected member of this community, and you will be his wife. It is decided. Do I have no say in my own future? Rebecca cried, her father's voice turned dangerously quiet. You are my daughter. Until you marry, you will obey me. And you will marry the judge 2 weeks from today. Rebecca fled to her room, tears streaming down her face. Through her window, she could see the distant mountains, seemingly so close yet impossibly far. Freedom lay somewhere beyond them if only she had the courage to reach for it. Waiting until her parents had retired for their afternoon rest, Rebecca changed into her riding clothes and slipped out to the small stable behind their house. She saddled her mare, Penny, and rode out of town toward the Harrington Ranch. Her heart pounded with each hoofbeat, a mixture of fear and determination driving her forward. The Harrington Ranch sprawled across several thousand acres of prime Montana grazing land. Rebecca rode past the main house and toward the corral area, where she'd been told the horse training would take place. She spotted Victor almost immediately. He stood in the center of a round pen, his attention focused entirely on a magnificent black stallion that circled him warily. Victor moved with a fluid grace, his body language communicating something to the horse that Rebecca couldn't fully comprehend. Several ranch hands watched from the rails, their expressions showing clear admiration for Victor's skill. Rebecca dismounted and approached quietly, not wanting to disrupt the delicate interaction. "He's got away with them, doesn't he?" a voice said beside her. Rebecca turned to find Edward Harrington, the ranch owner, watching the proceedings with satisfaction. "It's remarkable," Rebecca agreed. "How does he do it?" "Patience and respect," Edward replied. "Wallace understands that you can't force a horse's trust, you have to earn it. Most trainers try to break a horse's spirit. He builds partnership instead." Rebecca watched as Victor extended his hand to the stallion, which had stopped circling and now stood regarding the man cautiously. After a long moment, the horse stretched out its neck and touched Victor's palm with its muzzle. The ranch hands broke into applause, and the spell was broken. Victor patted the horse's neck, then turned and noticed Rebecca standing with Edward. Surprise flashed across his face, followed by something warmer. He said something to one of the hands, who took over with the stallion, then made his way to the fence. "Miss Owens," he greeted, removing his hat. "This is unexpected." "I hope I'm not intruding," Rebecca said. "Not at all," Edward assured her. "Always good to see our schoolteacher taking an interest in ranch operations. I'll leave you two to catch up." He winked at Victor before walking away. Victor vaulted easily over the fence to stand beside Rebecca. His shirt was damp with sweat, his face flushed from exertion, but his eyes were bright with the satisfaction of his work. "You have a remarkable gift," Rebecca said, nodding toward the stallion. "Mr. Harrington says you build partnership rather than breaking spirits." "It's the only way that lasts," Victor replied. "Break a horse's will and you'll never have his heart, but show him respect, give him choices." He glanced meaningfully at Rebecca. "That builds something stronger than obedience." Rebecca felt her face warm under his gaze. "I took your advice. I've been considering my options." Victor's expression turned serious. "And my friend Clara has connections in San Francisco. I could go there, find a teaching position, start fresh." Rebecca twisted her hands nervously. "But I'm afraid I've never been farther than Denver, and my family would be angry," Victor finished for her, "possibly disown you." Rebecca nodded miserably. "Is freedom worth that price?" Victor was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the ranch lands toward the mountains. "Only you can answer that," he finally said. "But consider this: you'd be trading one temporary pain for a lifetime of regret." "I met with Judge Hollister today," Rebecca said quietly. "The way he looked at me, I felt like property being assessed." Victor's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "When is the wedding meant to take place?" 2 weeks from today," Rebecca replied, her voice barely audible. 2 weeks, Victor repeated thoughtfully. "The stagecoach runs to Helena twice weekly, connects to the railroad there." He seemed to be thinking aloud. "From there, you could reach San Francisco in about a week." Rebecca looked at him in surprise. "You've given this some thought." Victor met her gaze directly. "I have." "Why?" Rebecca asked. "Why would you help a stranger this way?" Victor hesitated, then gestured to a bench under a nearby tree. "Walk with me." They moved away from the corral, finding shade beneath the old cottonwood. When they sat, Victor seemed to struggle with what to say next. "I had a sister," he finally began, his voice low. "Mary, she was brilliant, could recite Shakespeare, calculate sums faster than anyone I knew. She dreamed of becoming a doctor." Rebecca noticed his use of past tense and felt a chill. "Our father arranged her marriage to a business associate, a man 30 years her senior who wanted a young, obedient wife. Mary begged him to reconsider." Victor's eyes darkened with the memory. "He refused, said it was her duty." "What happened?" Rebecca asked softly. "The marriage took place. Her husband took her to Chicago, where he kept her virtually imprisoned in their home. No friends, no books, nothing that might put ideas in her head." Victor's hands clenched into fists. She wrote to me in secret, telling me how he mistreated her. I was planning to help her escape, but—" He fell silent and Rebecca instinctively reached for his hand. After a moment, he continued. "She took her own life, couldn't bear another day in that prison." His voice broke slightly. "She was 22 years old." "Victor, I'm so sorry," Rebecca whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I was too late to save my sister," he said, his voice strengthening. "But when I saw you in that schoolhouse, reading that letter, looking so desperate, I promised myself I wouldn't be too late again." Rebecca felt as though the world had tilted on its axis. This explained his immediate understanding, his offer of help with no conditions attached. "I don't mean to compare your situation directly," Victor added quickly. "Judge Hollister may be nothing like my sister's husband, but the principle remains the same. Your life should be yours to determine." "Thank you for telling me," Rebecca said, still holding his hand. "About Mary," Victor nodded, seeming embarrassed by his emotional disclosure. "So, San Francisco, it seems like my best option," Rebecca confirmed. "Clara says I could stay with her cousin until I find my footing." "When would you leave?" "The stagecoach runs on Wednesday and Saturday," Rebecca said. "I thought perhaps Wednesday morning before anyone would think to look for me." Victor nodded thoughtfully. "You'll need money, references for teaching positions." "I've saved a little from my salary," Rebecca said, "and I have letters of recommendation from the teachers' college." "Good," Victor approved. "And you're certain this is what you want?" Rebecca took a deep breath. "The alternative is unthinkable." "Then I'll help however I can," Victor promised. "The stagecoach depot opens at dawn. I could meet you there, make sure you get on safely." Rebecca felt a curious mix of relief and sadness. She'd only just met this man, yet the thought of leaving, never seeing him again, created an unexpected ache in her chest. "I'd appreciate that," she said softly. Victor held her gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then he gently withdrew his hand. "I should get back to work," he said, standing. "Those Mustangs won't train themselves." Rebecca nodded, also rising. "And I should return before my absence is noticed." Victor walked her back to her horse, helping her mount with strong, steady hands at her waist. "Wednesday morning, then." "First light at the depot. I'll be there," Rebecca confirmed, gathering her reins. "And Victor, thank you." He tipped his hat, his eyes holding hers. "Safe journey home, Miss Owens." Rebecca rode back to town with a lighter heart than she'd had in days. She had a plan now, a chance at freedom. Yet as the miles passed beneath Penny's hooves, she found herself thinking not of San Francisco, but of Victor Wallace's hands at her waist, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her, and the passion in his voice when he spoke of choices and freedom. She would likely never see him again after Wednesday morning. The thought brought an unexpected pang that Rebecca pushed firmly aside. This wasn't about Victor Wallace. This was about her future, a future she was finally taking into her own hands. The next 2 days passed in a blur of secret preparations and anxious waiting. Rebecca carefully packed a single carpet bag with essential clothing and her most treasured possessions, her grandmother's locket, her teaching credentials, and the journal where she'd poured out her dreams and fears. She converted her meager savings into a bank draft that could be cashed in San Francisco and wrote letters to her parents and Clara to be delivered after her departure. By Tuesday evening, everything was in place. Rebecca went through the motions of family dinner, answered her mother's questions about wedding preparations with noncommittal murmurs, and retired early to her room, claiming a headache. Sleep proved elusive as she lay in bed, watching moonlight creep across her ceiling. In just a few hours, she would leave behind everything familiar: her family, her students, her home, for an uncertain future in a distant city. Was she being foolish, selfish, or brave? Victor's words echoed in her mind. You'd be trading one temporary pain for a lifetime of regret. She had to believe he was right. Finally, as the first hint of dawn lightened the eastern sky, Rebecca rose quietly. She dressed in her traveling clothes, a practical blue skirt and jacket, sturdy boots, and a plain hat secured with pins. She pinned a small brooch to her collar, not the gaudy ruby from Judge Hollister, which she'd left on her dresser with a note, but a simple silver pin that had been a gift from her students last Christmas. Taking one last look around her childhood bedroom, Rebecca picked up her carpet bag and crept downstairs. She left her letters on the kitchen table, where they would be found at breakfast, then slipped out the back door into the cool morning air. The streets of Pinecrest were deserted at this hour, mist hanging low over the buildings. Rebecca walked quickly, staying close to the shadows, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would wake the town. The stagecoach depot stood at the far end of Main Street, a small wooden building with a covered platform where passengers could wait. As she approached, Rebecca saw a solitary figure already waiting. Victor stood beneath the platform overhang, dressed for travel in a long coat, his hat pulled low. When he spotted her, relief washed over his features. "You came," he said quietly as she reached him. "Did you doubt I would?" Rebecca asked, setting down her bag. "Not doubt," Victor replied, "but choices like this, they're never easy to follow through on." Inside the depot, a lamp flickered as the station agent prepared for the day's first departure. Outside, the faint sounds of the stagecoach team being readied drifted from the nearby stables. "Are you certain about this?" Victor asked, studying her face in the dim light. Rebecca took a deep breath. "Yes, terrified but certain," Victor nodded, a small smile touching his lips. Fear and certainty often go hand in hand when it comes to important decisions. They fell silent as the station agent emerged, unlocking the depot door. "Stagecoach leaves in 20 minutes, he announced gruffly. "Tickets inside." Rebecca moved to follow him, but Victor touched her arm. "Wait," he said, his expression suddenly uncertain. "Before you go, I have a proposition for you." Rebecca looked at him quizzically. "A proposition?" Victor ran a hand through his hair, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. "I've been thinking about your situation, about San Francisco." "What about it? It's very far," he said, "and you'd be alone at least until you establish yourself." "I have Clara's cousin," Rebecca reminded him. "Yes, but—" Victor took a deep breath. "There's another option you might consider." Rebecca waited, puzzled by his hesitation. "I own land," he said finally, "near Helena. Good land with water rights and timber. I've been building a horse ranch there between training jobs. It's modest now, but with potential." "That's wonderful," Rebecca said, still confused about how this related to her situation. "What I'm trying to say badly is that Helena has a growing school. They need teachers. You could find work there much closer than San Francisco, and you would have a friend nearby, someone to help you get established." Understanding dawned slowly. "You're suggesting I go to Helena instead?" "Yes," Victor said, then rushed on. "You'd have your independence, your own life, your teaching, but also support if you needed it." Rebecca studied him, seeing something in his eyes she hadn't fully recognized before. "Why would you do this?" Victor held her gaze steadily. "Because in the few days I've known you, Rebecca Owens, I've come to admire your courage, your intelligence, and your determination. Because I'd like the chance to know you better on your terms when you're truly free to choose your own path." Rebecca felt her heart beating wildly. "Are you courting me, Mr. Wallace?" A slow smile spread across Victor's face. "I'm suggesting we might court in time if you were amenable. But first and foremost, I'm offering friendship and practical assistance with no obligations attached." "I see," Rebecca said, her mind racing. Helena was indeed much closer than San Francisco, yet still far enough from Pinecrest to be safe from her father's influence or Judge Hollister's reach. And having a friend there, someone who understood her situation. The depot door opened again and the station agent called, "Stage loading in 10 minutes. Tickets, please." "I don't mean to pressure you," Victor said quickly. "San Francisco is still a perfectly good option. I just wanted you to know there's another possibility." Rebecca found herself smiling despite the gravity of the moment. "You truly are determined to give me choices, aren't you?" Victor's expression softened. "Always." The sincerity in that single word made Rebecca's decision suddenly clear. "I think I'd like to see Helena," she said, "and this horse ranch of yours." Victor's face lit up with surprised delight. "Really, really," Rebecca confirmed, "though I'll need to send word to Clara's cousin explaining the change of plans." "Of course," Victor agreed quickly. "We can telegraph from Helena." The station agent approached them. "You folks buying tickets or just taking up space on my platform?" "2 tickets to Helena," Victor replied, reaching for his wallet. "I can pay for my own," Rebecca interjected. Victor paused, then nodded respectfully. "Of course." Inside the depot, As they completed their transactions, Rebecca felt a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. She was really doing this, leaving behind everything familiar for an uncertain future. But unlike the future her father and Judge Hollister had planned for her, this one contained possibility and choice. Outside, the stagecoach rolled up to the platform, the driver securing luggage as passengers began to board. "There's something you should know," Victor said quietly as they waited their turn. "About Helena." "What's that?" Rebecca asked. "I'll be escorting you there, making sure you arrive safely and helping you get settled," he explained. "But then I have to return here, at least temporarily. I have a contract with the Harringtons to complete." Rebecca felt a stab of disappointment. "How long?" "3 more weeks," Victor replied. "Then I'm free to return to my own place." "I see," Rebecca nodded, considering this. "What will I do in Helena for 3 weeks alone?" "The schoolmaster there, Mr. Townsend, is an old friend," Victor said. "I've already written to him about a possible teaching position, and there's a respectable boarding house for ladies where you can stay. Mrs. Fleming runs it. She's strict but fair." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "You've given this considerable thought." Victor looked slightly embarrassed. "I may have made some inquiries after our conversation at the ranch." Before Rebecca could respond, the driver called, "All aboard who's coming aboard." "That's us," Victor said, picking up Rebecca's bag along with his own. As they climbed into the stagecoach, taking seats opposite each other, Rebecca realized something important. "You know," she said as the coach lurched into motion, "in all our discussions about my future, I never asked about yours." Victor looked surprised. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," Rebecca replied honestly. "Your plans for your ranch, your hopes. You've given me choices. What choices are you making for yourself?" As the stagecoach rolled out of Pinecrest, carrying them toward Helena and a future neither had anticipated just days ago, Victor began to tell Rebecca about his dreams. The hours and miles passed, their conversation flowing easily from serious topics to shared laughter, each learning the contours of the other's mind and heart. By the time they reached Helena late the following day, Rebecca knew she had made the right decision not just to escape a forced marriage, but to follow this particular path, with this particular man walking beside her, respecting her independence while offering his support. Helena in 1876 was a bustling mining town, more developed than Pinecrest, but still carrying the raw energy of a frontier settlement. True to his word, Victor escorted Rebecca to Mrs. Fleming's boarding house, a 3-story building on a respectable street near the center of town. "Mrs. Fleming," Victor greeted the stern-looking woman who answered the door. "Thank you for accommodating my request on such short notice." The older woman's severe expression softened slightly at the sight of Victor. "Mr. Wallace, always a pleasure." Her gaze shifted to Rebecca, assessing. "And this is the young lady in need of lodging?" "Rebecca Owens." Rebecca introduced herself, extending her hand. "I'm very grateful for the room, Mrs. Fleming." "Miss Owens is a qualified teacher," Victor added. "She'll be meeting with Mr. Townsend about a position at the school." Mrs. Fleming's expression warmed further. "A teacher? We're in desperate need of educated women in this territory. Come in, come in." After settling Rebecca into a small but comfortable room on the 2nd floor, Victor reluctantly prepared to leave. "I've arranged to meet with Mr. Townsend tomorrow morning," he told her as they stood in the boarding house parlor. "If you're agreeable, I'll escort you there at 9. "That would be perfect," Rebecca replied, suddenly anxious at the thought of his departure. "And then you'll return to Pinecrest?" Victor nodded. "The afternoon stage. I have responsibilities there to conclude." An awkward silence fell between them, both aware that their brief but intense connection would be interrupted for nearly a month. "Victor," Rebecca finally said, her voice low to avoid being overheard by Mrs. Fleming, who hovered nearby. "Thank you, not just for the practical help, but for showing me I had choices when everyone else said I didn't." Victor took her hand, his touch warm and steady. "You always had the strength to choose, Rebecca. I just reminded you of it." He hesitated, then added, "May I write to you while I'm away?" Rebecca felt a rush of warmth. "I'd like that very much." "And perhaps," Victor continued carefully, "when I return, we might begin that courtship we discussed. Only if you wish it, of course, once you're settled and secure in your own right. Rebecca smiled, squeezing his hand. I think I would wish it very much. The following day brought success beyond Rebecca's hopes. Mr. Townsend, impressed by her credentials and desperate for qualified teachers, offered her a position starting immediately. The school term had already begun, and one of the teachers had departed unexpectedly for family reasons. It's providential timing, the older man declared. Though the children may need a firm hand, they've had substitute teachers for 2 weeks now. I'm not afraid of a challenge, Rebecca assured him, excitement building at the prospect of her own classroom. Victor, who had accompanied her to the meeting, beamed with pride. Miss Owens managed a one-room schoolhouse in Pinecrest with students of all ages. I'm certain she can handle anything your school presents. As they walked back toward the boarding house, Rebecca felt lighter than she had in months. I can hardly believe it, she said. My own classroom, a proper salary, and no Judge Hollister in sight. Victor laughed. You've earned this, Rebecca, through your own merit and courage. They stopped at a small cafe for lunch, both aware that their time together was rapidly dwindling. The stagecoach back to Pinecrest would depart at 3 o'clock. Will you be all right? Victor asked as they lingered over coffee. I don't like leaving you alone in a strange city. I'll be fine, Rebecca assured him, though she felt a pang at the thought of his departure. Mrs. Fleming seems kind beneath that stern exterior, and I start teaching on Monday. I'll be too busy to be lonely. Victor nodded, though he looked unconvinced. I've written down the location of my property, he said, sliding a folded paper across the table. It's about 5 miles outside town. Once you're settled, you might ride out to see it if you'd like. Rebecca tucked the paper into her reticule. I'd like that very much. Too soon, they were standing at the stagecoach depot, the moment of parting upon them. 3 weeks will pass quickly, Victor said, though his expression suggested he didn't quite believe it. Very quickly, Rebecca agreed, and we'll write. Victor took her hands in his gaze intense. Rebecca, he began, then seemed to think better of it. Be safe, and remember your future is your own now. Rebecca felt a sudden boldness rise within her. Standing on tiptoe, she pressed a quick kiss to Victor's cheek. Thank you for making that possible, she whispered. Victor's eyes widened in surprise, then crinkled with pleasure. He squeezed her hands once more before reluctantly boarding the stage. As the coach pulled away, Rebecca stood watching until it disappeared from sight, her heart full of conflicting emotions. She was alone in a strange city, yet for the first time in her life she felt truly free. Whatever came next would be her choice, her future to shape as she saw fit, and somewhere in that future, she hoped, would be Victor Wallace. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity for Rebecca. Her new teaching position kept her busy from dawn until dusk, with 28 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Unlike her one-room schoolhouse in Pinecrest, the Helena School boasted separate classrooms for different age groups, and Rebecca found herself teaching the middle years children from 10 to 13. Her students tested her at first, as Mr. Townsend had warned, but Rebecca's natural authority and genuine enthusiasm for teaching soon won them over. By the end of her first week, she had established herself as firm but fair, earning both respect and affection from her charges. Mrs. Fleming proved to be an excellent landlady, strict about maintaining the boarding house's respectable reputation but warm and supportive of Rebecca's independence. The other boarders, 3 seamstresses, an older widow, and a young woman who worked as a telegraph operator, quickly became friends, creating a small community that eased Rebecca's transition to city life. True to his word, Victor wrote regularly. His letters arrived each Wednesday and Saturday, detailed accounts of his work with the Harrington Mustangs interspersed with questions about her new life and thoughtful observations that made Rebecca feel he was somehow present despite the distance. The black stallion, I've named him Midnight, is coming along well, he wrote in one letter. He has spirit but not meanness, reminds me of someone else I know who faces life with courage and determination. Rebecca wrote back just as faithfully, describing her students, her growing friendship with the other teachers, and her explorations of Helena. She found herself being more open with Victor on paper than she had ever been with anyone in person, sharing not just the events of her days but her thoughts, fears, and hopes. 2 weeks after her arrival, Rebecca borrowed a horse from the school's stable master and rode out to see Victor's property. Following his careful directions, she found it easily a picturesque stretch of land nestled in a small valley, with mountains rising behind it and a clear stream cutting through. The cabin stood on a gentle rise overlooking a fenced paddock and small barn. It was more substantial than Rebecca had expected, a solidly built structure with a covered porch and stone chimney. Though clearly a bachelor's residence, it showed care and craftsmanship in its construction. Rebecca didn't enter, feeling that would be presumptuous, but she tied her horse to the porch rail and walked the property, imagining how it would look with horses grazing in the meadow and smoke rising from the chimney. There was room here to build, to grow, room for a life. In her letter that evening, Rebecca described her visit in detail, concluding with words that surprised her with their honesty. "Your land has a quality of welcome about it, as though it's been waiting for something or someone. I could almost see children playing by the stream and horses in the meadow. It's a place of possibility, Victor, like the future you helped me claim." The day of Victor's expected return dawned clear and cool, with autumn painting the surrounding mountains in golds and reds. Rebecca found herself unable to concentrate on her lessons, her eyes constantly straying to the clock. Victor's last letter had confirmed he would arrive on the afternoon stage, around 4 o'clock. "Miss Owens, you seem distracted today," observed Emma Landry, one of Rebecca's brightest students. As the children filed out at the end of the school day, Rebecca smiled, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "Perhaps a little, Emma. I'm expecting a visitor." The girl's eyes lit with interest. "A gentleman visitor?" "Yes," Rebecca admitted. "A friend who helped me when I first came to Helena." Emma nodded sagely. "My ma says you're too pretty to stay a spinster schoolteacher forever." Rebecca laughed despite herself. "Does she indeed?" "Well, you can tell your mother that this spinster schoolteacher is quite content with her life. Thank you very much." But as she hurried back to the boarding house to change her dress before heading to the stagecoach depot, Rebecca had to admit that Emma's mother might have a point. The independence she had fought for remained precious, but the prospect of seeing Victor again filled her with an anticipation that had nothing to do with friendship, and everything to do with the growing feelings she'd been examining during their separation. She changed into her best day dress, a deep blue wool that brought out her eyes, and pinned her hair more carefully than usual before setting out for the depot. Her heart pounded as she approached, scanning the waiting crowd for Victor's tall figure. The stagecoach arrived in a cloud of dust, passengers disembarking wearily after the long journey. Rebecca stood on tiptoe, searching anxiously as travelers reunited with waiting family members. And then suddenly he was there, stepping down from the coach, his gaze immediately finding hers in the crowd. For a moment they simply looked at each other, the busy depot fading around them. Then Victor was moving toward her, his face breaking into a smile that transformed his serious features. "Rebecca," he said as he reached her, setting down his bag to take her hands in his. "You're a sight for sore eyes." "Welcome back," Rebecca replied, surprised by the breathlessness in her voice. "How was your journey?" "Long," Victor admitted, his eyes never leaving her face. "But worth every mile." They stood awkwardly for a moment, both suddenly shy despite weeks of intimate correspondence. "Mrs. Fleming is expecting you for dinner," Rebecca finally said. "I told her you were arriving today." Victor nodded, picking up his bag. "Lead the way." As they walked through Helena's busy streets, conversation flowed more easily. Victor described the successful completion of his contract with the Harringtons, while Rebecca updated him on her teaching position and the friends she'd made. "You seem at home here already," Victor observed, satisfaction evident in his voice. "I am," Rebecca agreed. "Thanks to you." Victor shook his head. "You did this, Rebecca. You made the choice and built this new life, with your support," she insisted. "Not everyone would have offered help with no conditions attached." Victor's expression turned serious. "Speaking of conditions," he said, slowing his pace, "there's something I should tell you about Pinecrest." Rebecca tensed. "Has something happened?" Your parents came looking for you the day after you left, Victor said carefully. They were distraught. Rebecca winced, guilt washing over her despite her conviction that she'd made the right choice. I left them letters explaining my decision. They thought you'd been coerced, Victor continued, or worse, Judge Hollister was particularly vocal about his concerns. What did you tell them? Rebecca asked, suddenly worried about Victor's position. Nothing at first, Victor replied. I was at the ranch, and no one connected me to your departure immediately, but eventually the station agent mentioned seeing us together that morning. Rebecca felt a chill. Were there consequences for you? Victor's mouth quirked in a wry smile. Let's just say I completed my contract with the Harringtons under the disapproving eye of much of Pinecrest society. The judge made some threats about kidnapping and interference, but without evidence, there was little he could do. I'm sorry, Rebecca said, genuinely distressed. I never meant to cause trouble for you. Don't be sorry, Victor said firmly. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. He hesitated, then added, there's more. I received a letter from your friend Clara before I left. She asked me to give it to you directly. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew an envelope, which Rebecca accepted with trembling fingers. Shall I give you privacy to read it? Victor offered. Rebecca shook her head. No, I'd rather you stayed. She opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. Dearest Rebecca, she read aloud, her voice soft. I pray this finds you safe and well. Your departure caused quite the sensation, as you might imagine. Judge Hollister is furious, your father embarrassed, and your mother torn between worry and a strange pride I didn't expect from her. She confided to me that while she disapproves of your methods, she admires your courage she wishes she'd possessed at your age. Rebecca paused, surprised by this revelation about her mother. The judge has made wild accusations about your abduction, but few take them seriously, she continued reading. Most people see it for what it was, a young woman choosing her own path rather than submitting to an arrangement that offered security but little happiness. William and I have defended your choice vigorously, though it's cost us some social standing. Rebecca felt tears welling. Dear, loyal Clara, your father has declared you are no longer welcome in his home, but your mother slipped me this to send to you. Here Clara had pinned a small package to the letter, Rebecca's grandmother's wedding ring, which her mother had inherited and promised would one day be Rebecca's. She said some traditions are worth preserving, even when others must be broken. The tears spilled over now, running down Rebecca's cheeks. Write when you can, dear friend, and know you are missed but not forgotten. Those who truly love you respect your right to determine your own destiny. With affection, Clara. Rebecca carefully folded the letter, wiping her eyes. My mother surprised me, she said softly. I thought she would never forgive me. Victor handed her his handkerchief. Parents often understand more than we give them credit for, even when they don't agree with our choices. Rebecca nodded, composing herself as they resumed walking. Thank you for bringing this. It means more than I can say. They reached the boarding house, where Mrs. Fleming welcomed Victor warmly and showed him to a small room on the first floor, reserved for male visitors, and kept deliberately distant from the ladies' quarters upstairs. Over dinner with the other boarders, conversation flowed easily, with Victor charming the women with tales of his horse-training adventures. Rebecca watched him, noting how naturally he fit into this community she'd become part of, how his quiet confidence and respectful manner put everyone at ease. After dinner, Mrs. Fleming allowed them use of the parlor, though she pointedly left the door open and positioned herself within view, knitting while pretending not to observe them. She's very protective, Victor noted with amusement as they sat on the sofa, a respectable distance between them. She takes her responsibility for her girls very seriously, Rebecca agreed, though she's been wonderfully supportive of my independence in other ways. They talked for over an hour, the conversation ranging from Victor's plans for his ranch to Rebecca's hopes for her students. As the evening drew to a close, Victor leaned forward slightly, his expression turning serious. Rebecca, he began, his voice low enough that Mrs. Fleming couldn't overhear. I meant what I wrote in my letters. These weeks apart have only confirmed what I began to feel in Pinecrest. Rebecca's heart quickened. And what is that? Victor's eyes held her steadily. That I would very much like to court you properly. not as your rescuer or protector, but as a man who admires your spirit, your intelligence, and your courage. A man who believes we could build something meaningful together. Despite expecting this moment, Rebecca found herself momentarily speechless. The intensity in Victor's gaze, the sincerity in his voice, affected her more powerfully than she had anticipated. "I would like that too," she finally replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Very much." Victor's face lit with a joy that transformed his features. "Then may I call on you tomorrow evening? Perhaps we could attend the concert in the park. Mr. Townsend mentioned it during our correspondence." "I'd enjoy that," Rebecca smiled. Mrs. Fleming chose that moment to clear her throat loudly. "It's getting late," she announced, setting aside her knitting. "Early day tomorrow for everyone, I expect." Victor rose immediately, respecting the unsubtle hint. "Of course." "Thank you for your hospitality, Mrs. Fleming." He turned to Rebecca. "Until tomorrow, then," Rebecca nodded, rising as well. "I look forward to it." As she watched Victor bid goodnight to Mrs. Fleming and the remaining boarders, Rebecca felt a certainty settle over her. 3 weeks ago, she had fled a future chosen for her by others. Now she stood on the threshold of a future she was choosing for herself, a future that, she hoped, would include the remarkable man who had helped her find her courage. The autumn days that followed took on a golden quality for Rebecca, both literally as the season painted Helena in vibrant colors, and figuratively as her relationship with Victor deepened. True to his word, he courted her properly with evening walks, concerts in the park, and Sunday afternoon rides to his property outside town, always with proper chaperonage as required by Mrs. Fleming's strict rules. Victor had taken temporary lodging at a boarding house for men while he divided his time between Helena and his ranch. Each day, he would ride out to work on improvements to the property, returning to town in time to escort Rebecca for an evening stroll after her teaching duties were complete. "The barn extension is finished," he told her one evening as they walked through Helena's Central Park, the October air crisp around them. "And I've added another room to the cabin. For your horses," Rebecca teased, well aware of his devotion to his animals. Victor laughed, his breath visible in the cool air. "No, this one's for people, a proper sitting room with bookshelves." He glanced at her. "I remembered how many books you had in your schoolhouse." Rebecca felt a warmth that had nothing to do with her woolen shawl. Every improvement Victor described seemed designed with her in mind, though he never presumed or pushed. He was building a future one that could include her, if she chose it. As October turned to November, their courtship progressed with a natural ease that surprised Rebecca. She had expected to need more time to establish her independence before considering a serious attachment, yet she found that Victor never threatened her hard-won freedom. Instead, he seemed to delight in it, encouraging her teaching career and respecting her opinions even when they differed from his own. "Miss Peterson says it's unnatural for you to keep teaching now that you're being courted," Rebecca told him one day as they walked home from church. "She says a man wants a wife who will focus on home and family." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Miss Peterson seems to have strong opinions about what I want." "And what do you want?" Rebecca asked, suddenly serious. Victor stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "I want a partner, Rebecca. Someone who shares my life because she chooses to, not because she has no other options. If teaching fulfills you, why would I want to take that away?" Rebecca studied his face, finding only sincerity there. "And children, a home to manage." "Those things can come in time if we both want them," Victor replied, "but they don't have to mean the end of everything else that matters to you." Rebecca felt something tight inside her chest release. All her life, she had been told that marriage meant surrendering her other dreams. Victor was offering a different vision, partnership rather than ownership. As winter approached, bringing the first snow to the mountains surrounding Helena, Rebecca found herself spending more time at Victor's ranch on weekends. Mrs. Fleming had reluctantly agreed to allow these visits after Victor hired Mrs. Prescott, an elderly widow from his church, to serve as chaperone. The property was transforming under Victor's careful attention. The cabin now boasted comfortable furnishings, the promised bookshelves, and a piano in the new sitting room, a surprise that had brought tears to Rebecca's eyes when she first saw it. You mentioned in one of your letters that you missed playing, Victor had explained, somewhat embarrassed by her emotional reaction. I found it at an estate sale in town. On one such visit in early December, as they sat by the fire while Mrs. Prescott dozed in a nearby chair, Victor broached a subject they had been circling for weeks. Christmas is coming, he observed, watching the flames dance in the hearth. The school term will end soon. For 2 weeks, Rebecca agreed. Mr. Townsend is very generous with the holiday. Victor was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Have you thought about visiting Pinecrest, seeing your family?" Rebecca tensed. Despite Clara's letters, which had continued regularly, the wound of her father's rejection remained painful. "I'm not sure I'd be welcome. Your mother might feel differently," Victor suggested gently. "Clara's letters indicate she misses you," Rebecca sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Perhaps. But my father made his position clear, and Judge Hollister has married someone else," Victor finished for her. At Rebecca's startled look, he explained, "Clara mentioned it in her last letter to me. A widow from Miles City, apparently. Very practical arrangement." Relief washed over Rebecca. "I'm glad," she said honestly. "Not that I wished him ill, but it removes a complication," Victor nodded, "and perhaps opens a door for reconciliation with your parents." Rebecca considered this. The pain of separation from her family had been a constant undercurrent in her new life, despite her happiness in other areas. "I'll think about it," she promised. Victor reached across the space between their chairs, taking her hand. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." In that moment, looking at their joined hands in the firelight, Rebecca knew with sudden clarity what her heart had been telling her for weeks. She loved this man not with the desperate gratitude of a rescued damsel, but with the deep, steady affection of a woman who had found her equal. "Victor," she said softly, meeting his gaze. "I don't need to think about Christmas." He looked puzzled. "No, no," Rebecca smiled, "because I already know where I want to be, here with you." She squeezed his hand. "If you'll have me." Understanding dawned in Victor's eyes, followed by a joy so pure it transformed his face. "Rebecca, are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you," she said simply. "And if you're still offering partnership rather than ownership, I think we could build something wonderful together." Victor was out of his chair in an instant, kneeling beside hers, still holding her hand. "I've loved you since that day in the schoolhouse," he confessed, "but I needed you to find your own way first, to know your own mind." "And now I do," Rebecca said, her free hand coming up to touch his face. "My mind and my heart are in complete agreement." Victor turned his head to kiss her palm, his eyes never leaving hers. "Rebecca Owens, will you marry me, not because anyone says you should, but because you choose to?" "Yes," Rebecca whispered, joy bubbling up inside her. "Yes, I choose you, Victor Wallace." Mrs. Prescott chose that moment to wake with a startled snort. "Goodness, what did I miss?" she demanded, adjusting her spectacles. Victor and Rebecca broke into laughter, the perfection of the moment undiminished by the interruption. As Mrs. Prescott fussed about propriety and appropriate distances between courting couples, they exchanged a private look of understanding and promise. Rebecca had fled Pinecrest to escape a future where she had no choice. In Helena, she had found not just freedom but something even more precious, a love based on respect, a man who put the choice in her hands and waited patiently for her answer. Christmas came to Helena in a flurry of snow and celebration. Rebecca and Victor's engagement announcement was met with congratulations from her fellow teachers, the boarding house residents, and Victor's growing circle of friends and business associates in town. After much consideration, Rebecca had written to her parents, extending an olive branch along with news of her engagement. The response, when it came, was from her mother alone, a cautiously warm letter that acknowledged the rift but expressed hope for healing. "Your father needs time," Eleanor Owens wrote, "but I would very much like to meet the man who has won your heart on your terms, not ours." They were married on New Year's Day, 1877, in Helena's small church, with Mrs. Fleming, Mr. Townsend, and Rebecca's school colleagues in attendance. To Rebecca's surprise and joy, her mother made the journey from Pinecrest, arriving 2 days before the wedding with Clara and Dr. Bennett as her traveling companions. "He's a good man," Eleanor had whispered after meeting Victor for the first time. "I can see it in the way he looks at you, not as a possession, but as a treasure. The wedding was simple but meaningful, with Rebecca wearing a cream-colored silk dress she had made herself and carrying winter holly rather than traditional flowers. Victor, standing tall and proud at the altar, looked at her with such undisguised love that several of the ladies dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. "I take you, Rebecca, as my wife and partner," Victor vowed, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to respect your dreams as my own, to support your independence even as we build our life together, and to love you freely and completely all the days of my life." Rebecca, her heart too full for elaborate words, replied with equal sincerity, "I choose you, Victor, freely and with my whole heart. I promise to stand beside you as your equal, to build our dreams together, and to love you truly until my last breath." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Victor's kiss was gentle but held a promise that made Rebecca blush beneath her veil. They moved to the ranch immediately after the wedding, with Rebecca continuing to teach until the end of the school year in June. Each day, she would ride into town with Victor, teach her classes, then meet him for the journey home, a routine that raised some eyebrows among the more traditional townspeople but suited them perfectly. Spring brought new life to the land and new developments for their future. Victor's horse breeding business began to flourish, with his specially trained mounts fetching premium prices from ranchers and the cavalry alike. Rebecca, using her summers free from teaching, started a small program teaching children from outlying farms who couldn't reach the town school regularly. "It's the best of both worlds," she told Victor one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains. "I can teach and still be home with you." Victor smiled, his arm around her shoulders. "You've created something important here. Those children wouldn't have education otherwise." "We've both created something important," Rebecca corrected, leaning into his embrace. "This ranch, our home, the life we're building, it's more than I ever dared dream of." As summer turned to fall again, Rebecca made a discovery that added new dimension to their happiness. The first hints of morning sickness, confirmed by a visit to Dr. Bennett during his and Clara's visit in August, heralded the newest chapter in their lives. "A baby," Victor had whispered in awe when she told him, his hand gently touching her still flat stomach. "Our child. Are you happy?" Rebecca asked, suddenly uncertain. They had discussed children but hadn't planned on starting their family so soon. Victor gathered her into his arms, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," he assured her, "but Rebecca, this changes things. You're teaching." "We'll continue," she said firmly. "Perhaps not full-time at first, but we'll find a way. Other women manage motherhood and work." Victor nodded, his smile understanding. "Of course we will. Whatever you choose, we'll make it work together." As her pregnancy progressed, they prepared the small room adjacent to theirs as a nursery. Victor crafted a cradle from pine harvested on their own land, while Rebecca sewed tiny garments in the evenings. Their discussions about names and plans for the future brought them closer than ever, each day deepening the partnership they had built. In a surprising development that winter, a letter arrived from Rebecca's father, the first communication since she had left Pinecrest over a year before. "Your mother tells me I am to be a grandfather," Harold Owens wrote in his precise hand. "While I cannot condone the manner of your departure, I find I cannot bear the thought of never knowing my grandchild. If you and your husband would permit it, I would like to visit in the spring." Rebecca, reading the letter aloud to Victor by the fire, felt tears spring to her eyes. "He's reaching out," she said wonderingly. After all this time, Victor squeezed her hand. "Babies have a way of healing old wounds. Will you welcome him?" Rebecca nodded slowly. "Yes, it's time to build bridges, not walls." Their daughter, Mary Eleanor Wallace, was born on a perfect May morning in 1878, with Clara, now an experienced mother herself, assisting the local midwife. The tiny girl had Rebecca's auburn hair and Victor's changeable blue-gray eyes, a perfect blend of them both. "She's magnificent," Victor whispered, holding his daughter with careful reverence. "Thank you, Rebecca, for her, for us, for everything." Rebecca, exhausted but radiant, watched her husband cradle their child. "Thank you for waiting," she said softly, "for giving me the choice." Victor looked up, his eyes meeting hers with perfect understanding. Always, he promised. For all of our days. 2 weeks later, when Harold and Alina Owens arrived for their first visit, the sight of their granddaughter melted away the last of the tension between father and daughter. Harold, holding little Mary with unexpected tenderness, finally looked at Victor with something approaching respect. "You've built a good life here," he acknowledged gruffly. "Different than what I envisioned for Rebecca, but good." "It's the life we chose together," Victor replied, his arm around Rebecca's waist. "That makes all the difference." As they stood together on the porch that evening, watching the sunset with their daughter sleeping peacefully in Rebecca's arms and her parents settling into the guest room, Rebecca felt a sense of completion she had never imagined possible 2 years ago. "When I ran away from Pinecrest, I was only thinking of escape," she told Victor quietly. "I never dreamed I was running toward something so much better." Victor kissed her temple gently. "Sometimes the best journeys are the ones we don't plan. And the best destinations are the ones we choose together," Rebecca added, leaning against his strength as the stars began to appear above their home. In the years that followed, their family and ranch flourished together. Mary was joined by 2 brothers, William Victor and James Harold, and eventually by another sister, Clara Rose. Rebecca continued teaching, establishing a small school on their property that served both their children and those from neighboring ranches. Victor's reputation as a horse trainer and breeder spread throughout the territory, bringing a comfortable prosperity that allowed them to expand their home and holdings. Yet through all the changes and growth, one thing remained constant: the respect and partnership that formed the foundation of their marriage. Often, visitors to the Wallace Ranch would remark on the unusual dynamic between husband and wife. Unlike many frontier couples, Victor and Rebecca shared decisions equally, each deferring to the other's expertise in different areas. In a time and place where women's roles were narrowly defined, they created their own definition of marriage. "People talk," Rebecca observed once after overhearing gossip in town about her unconventional household. "They think it's strange that you consult me on business matters or that I still teach." Victor had merely smiled, unconcerned. "Let them talk, we know what works for us." On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they stood together watching their children play beside the stream that ran through their property, now a prosperous ranch with a dozen employees and the finest horses in the territory, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought them there. "10 years ago, I was running from a future where I had no voice," she said, leaning against Victor's shoulder. "I was so afraid. And now," Victor asked, his arm secure around her waist, his face lined with a decade of sun and laughter but still handsome to her eyes. Rebecca looked at their home, their children, the life they had built stone by stone and choice by choice. "Now I know that the best futures are the ones we build together, choice by choice, day by day." Victor turned to face her fully, his eyes still holding the same respect and love they had shown on that first stormy day in the Pinecrest schoolhouse. "And would you choose it all again? This life, this man?" Rebecca rose on tiptoe to kiss him, her answer requiring no words but given anyway, her voice sure and strong. "Every day, Victor Wallace. Every single day I choose you."